Good morning. Public Works and utility crews along with Park Department employees have been working throughout the night to clear rights-of-way, the city streets, starting with arterial roadways, working our way into neighborhood streets. At this point, the damage that we've seen is primarily in the central and western part of the city, generally west of Hillside. While that whole area has sustained damage from the wind that is primarily tree damage, there are areas that are very lightly impacted and areas that are very significantly impacted. So the damage that we're seeing is widespread, but it's very spotty in terms of being isolated to severe in some areas. At this point, the city of Wichita has decided that we will not be picking up tree waste from private property. We will be working to clear the public rights-of-ways. We will be working to address tree waste from trees that are on the public right-of-way, but we will not be collecting waste from private property. In the press release that's been provided are 4 locations that are identified where citizens can take waste that they have from private property and dispose of that waste for a fee. Alternatively, citizens can work with their waste haulers or other contractors to provide cleanup of private property. We expect that the cleanup work that we're engaged in right now to address the public part of this damage will take several weeks to accomplish. We appreciate your patience as we work our way through the damaged areas. Assessment of the damage is continuing at this point. There may be revisions to our plan in terms of the areas that we're working on clearing the public rights-of-way. Questions?
Joe, what's the criteria as to why you're not going to pick up?
At this point, because of the nature of the work that we have to do to address the public rights-of-ways and the damage that we are responsible for, that's going to consume the resources that we have available.
What kind of damage are you seeing out there? Primarily tree damage?
We are seeing primarily tree damage. We do know from city facilities that there has been at least a couple of facilities with some roof damage. The damage of city facilities is continuing. We do have all of our critical infrastructure operating at or near normal. The reason I say near normal is we have a number of wastewater lift stations, sanitary sewage lift stations. They're operating on emergency generator power because Westar is working to restore the normal utility power.
Are you going to have crews working any kind of overtime or just kind of their normal schedules?
We began our response work last night. We did work through the night. We will try to work to minimize the overtime costs by adjusting work schedules where we can. But with this storm hitting as late in the week as it did, some people had already worked their normal 40-hour work week, and therefore there will be some overtime cost to our response.
Joe, how does this impact the other areas of, public works? I mean, obviously, if you've got crews doing this, how does this affect the other areas?
The primary responders to the tree cleanup from Public Works and Utilities are coming from street maintenance. As a result of that, we are deferring normal street maintenance activities, except for those situations where we have significant work zones that are impacting the travel of the public. Those areas we're working to go ahead and finish up, but we will basically be deferring street maintenance and some sign maintenance for traffic signs and other signage and pavement markings. I do want to also say that we have a number of intersections across the city where the signals for those intersections, the traffic control signals, have been impacted by the wind. Obviously, drivers need to be careful as they approach signalized intersections to make sure they're seeing the correct signals and not one that has gotten turned from another direction. We're working to clear those. Most of those seem at this point to be minor adjustments that we're making, but people need to be aware of that. I think we have all of our intersections back in power now, but I would remind folks that if they come to an intersection that's signalized where the signals are not operating, that drivers have to approach that as a four-way stop.
Do you have an estimate as to how much this cleanup will cost above and beyond your normal operating costs?
At this point, we do not have an estimate of cost. The damage is spotty enough that it's not clear exactly how much waste we're going to end up to dispose of. Most of the cost of collecting the waste will be from city employees, most of that on regular time, so that will be a relatively small budget impact. In past storms, the wood waste, the tree waste that we've disposed of, we've decided to incinerate with a high technology incineration process to minimize the impact on air quality. Last time we did that, which was the tornado, we had a disposal cost of about $60,000. I expect this time it could be higher because there's so much more area that's covered by the storm.
Is that kind of the reason why you guys have opted to not go into the residential area, because it is such a wide area? I mean,
it is a widespread area. The difficulty of addressing the waste that would come out of the private property, we think, is something that at this point appears to us to be manageable by the individual citizens, the private property owners.
Do you have a time frame of how long you think it's going to take to get?
For the work that we're doing on the public rights-of-way, we expect it to take several weeks for us to complete that work, so we ask for the public's patience as we work our way through damaged areas. Again, because some areas are very heavily damaged, if you're in a heavily damaged area, realize there are other areas just like that around the city that we're also addressing.
What does this cleanup work consist of? Basically just picking up down tree limbs, or?
The cleanup work at this point is primarily aimed at two things. Number one, getting the streets open, so the arterials first, then the residential streets. The second thing that we're doing, the park department is working on, is the branches that are hanging in a dangerous condition from the public rights-of-way, the street trees. They're making sure to take those down so that they don't end up creating a problem if they were to fall while we're doing the rest of the cleanup. After that, we will be working on clearing the streets in terms of the waste that was produced in the public right-of-way, the street trees.
Can you talk a little bit about what your responders did when they were sent out last night? I mean,
absolutely. Approximately 30 minutes after the storm went through, we had first supervisors on the street. Those supervisors were driving primarily the arterials, but looking somewhat in neighborhoods to try to assess two things. Number one, the location of the damage, and number two, the scope of it, how severe it was. At that point, we used that information as we were bringing crews in to start addressing the issue overnight to prioritize the work that we were doing. We got calls from citizens, we got calls from police special dispatch, and that added to the work list that we had to prioritize the work during the night to get the streets cleared.
Joe, how many people do you have at your disposal that you might have at like an average at any one time? I mean, could you say like how many people you have out working today?
We have up to 100 people that could be dedicated to this cleanup. At this point, we're running about 40 people dedicated to this purpose. And the reason for that is a large amount of the remainder are the folks that worked overnight, so they've already worked a shift and they're taking a rest break at this point.
does this include the parks? Will you guys be addressing the parks too, or will you kind of wait and do those later?
Park department will be addressing cleanup in the parks, and again, from a access point of view, anything that's got to be cleared for park drives or for access to park facilities will be first priority, and then we'll work on the open green spaces.
Is there anything else or that you think the public needs to be aware of or pay attention to?
I'll tell you that I was impressed with the response that citizens were making last night. I was out on the street watching as we were doing the initial damage assessment. I was impressed with neighbors helping neighbors. I was impressed with folks that were stopping when they came across small branches that were a problem to drive over but could be moved, that they were actually stopping their vehicles and helping to clear the public right of way. It was very representative of what happens in Wichita. FEMA says this storm event after storm event, they're amazed at how quickly our response is initiated.